The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It's Monday, the 18th of May, 2026. And today we have Dr. Suzanne Humphries coming on to talk about a couple of subjects. And then we have Isabella Yon with Mothers-to-Be. So stay tuned. Good morning, Dr. Suzanne. How are you?
Good morning, Polly. Very good, thank you. Wow, it's great to hear mothers-to-be's getting the time too.
Yeah, mothers-to-be, very important. Right, Dr. Suzanne Humphries, we are going to be talking, first of all, about Poul Thorsen, because we've covered it a little bit on CHD-TV, but for the very few who now do not know who he is, can you tell everybody who he is?
Oh, sure. Well, so first off, what's hit the news is that he has been indicted, right? And basically all that means is that he's been accused of doing something bad. It doesn't mean he's been arrested. It doesn't mean anything's been proven. And it certainly doesn't mean that this is anything new. I think I covered this back in 2015 when I was touring Scandinavia, and I thought it was quite amusing because there I was in Copenhagen, and he was right down the road, basically teaching at a university. If you went to the DHSS website back then, you'd see a picture of him, which I provided to you folks. And that was one of our top scientists in America. It's also one of the top scientists in Denmark. And he is the principal investigator on all CDC-funded Danish research that was used to counter the arguments from families that claimed their children suffered vaccine injuries, including autism. And all those studies were used by the U.S. government and vaccine stakeholders to deny the financial compensation and any possible connection between vaccines and autism. So he basically played his role very well. He's listed as one of the most wanted healthcare fugitives on the Office of Inspector General in the USA, and has been since 2015, right? And then I gave you guys a screenshot, or just basically a picture of his arrest warrant, which was filed in 2011 for felony violations. And it says right there that he's not in custody. And the reason he wasn't in custody is because he was living in Denmark and he was fully employed, apparently $2 million richer, and he was supposedly awaiting extradition to the United States. And it seems that the USA was pretty much uninterested in following through on that fugitive listing there, because there he's been all this time. And so the accusations include the following. In April 2011, he was indicted on 22 counts of wire fraud and money laundering. He stole grant money. He diverted over $1 million to his own bank account with fraudulent invoices. He purchased a home in Atlanta, Georgia, Harley Davidson motorcycle, Audi automobile, Honda SUV, and supposedly, if he was convicted on all counts, that he could face up to 260 years in prison and $22.5 million in fines. But the more recent studies that I looked at back then showed him as employed at the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Lillebælt Hospital in Kolding, Denmark. And I had somebody who speaks Danish call that hospital, and they confirmed on the 20th of March, 2012, that Poul Thorsen was indeed employed there and provided his email address as well. And so there you have a list of publications where these occurred since his indictment in April 2011. And I haven't updated this, but I suspect that he's probably has even more publications since then. And it gets even better because he carried on publishing after 2015. And here you go. The next slide shows that the study that was published was actually funded by the CDC. And I highlighted that in green there. Yeah. And there was another one. The next slide shows one that was published in 2014. So, bottom line is, I don't really think that CDC or the Office of Inspector General was really paying a heck of a lot of attention. There's something going on there that just doesn't make any sense at all. So here he is all that time. Back in 2015, I was saying, hey, wait a minute, how come nobody's arrested this guy? Why is he in Denmark still publishing papers funded by the CDC, who he supposedly stole money from? And now we hear that he's been indicted. Well, sorry if I can't get too excited about that.
But isn't it that the last administration were the ones that didn't want to bring him back? They were the ones that wanted it to cover up because he was consistently putting out things that vaccines don't cause autism, vaccines are safe and effective. It's anything. It's fathers with wonky sperm. It's mothers that are refrigerator mothers. Isn't that the kind of guy that he used to be?
Oh, yes. Basically, I mean, I don't have time to go through those studies right now, but these were the cardinal studies that have always been used to supposedly prove that vaccines don't cause autism. And the studies are highly flawed, as probably Brian Hooker covered with you when you talked about it, because of the selection bias and the timing of which they started measuring the autism, which was far too early because it doesn't manifest immediately afterwards. So he was a key player in the dogma that vaccines don't cause autism, and these studies that were published. And there's been, as far as I'm concerned, there's been a very limp-wristed, if any, even effort to bring any justice to this guy, probably because he was just doing what he was told. And 2015, think about 2011, 2012, that was Obama administration. So since then, we've had, other administrations, right? We've had Trump once. We've had, it's not just been the Biden problem. This is a really long-standing problem. And who cares what administration? Isn't there anybody within the CDC or the Office of Inspector General that wants to deliver justice to this guy that stole money from the USA, is sitting in a comfortable office in Denmark, publishing papers funded by the CDC? Something's seriously wrong here.
Well, he's now in America as we speak, and so someone has brought him back. And why now? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I think that's the question of the day. Why now? And he's only been indicted. If you look up the word indicted and what it means, it doesn't mean that anything has actually happened. It just means that somebody says, you did this. And then now there has to be an investigation. And perhaps after that, there can be charges made, and then there can be some trial. And probably Mary Holland can cover that from a legal perspective.
Well, so someone said to me the other day, why are you even covering this? Like, who cares? Which I find really an annoying statement. But surely that once at some point interrogated, he's going to have to tell us the truth of what really happened. What's really going on there? Who is making you, if it's someone's making you, cover this up, go out there saying vaccines are safe and effective? How the hell did you get to steal $1 million without someone noticing earlier?
Yeah. Well, it'll be really interesting, A, if he survives, and B, if he actually talks and what he says when he does talk. But yeah, I mean, I guess we can say, oh, this is the dawn of a new day. But sorry, I'm a little skeptical about all this. I'd love to have a show, in another 6 months, telling me that I was completely wrong.
So do the public need to know anything else about Poul Thorsen? He was a wicked man who stole a lot of money and did a lot of damage, because babies and children died because he put out papers and statements saying that vaccines are basically fundamentally safe and effective. So is there anything else that people do they need to keep their eye on this story?
Well, I think so, but I think it's more important, especially for young people who are coming in and saying, who even is this guy, to know that the studies that were published with his name were basically used in the kangaroo courts as backup that vaccines don't cause autism. This is why so many people with their children whose brains were lost after vaccination will never see a cent, will never win a court case because of these studies. So, it would be really amazing if these studies were Wakefielded and retracted, and that this guy was treated the same way that Andy was, and that Andy would be reinstated, because that would actually be true justice. But this is the reason why, if you have to be really clever, if you have a child who had brain damage after a vaccine and you want any compensation at all, you have to call it encephalitis, or you have to say that the child had a genetic problem that predisposed the child, but you can't say that my child became autistic after a vaccine, because these two papers would be slammed down as the definitive evidence that vaccines don't cause autism.
So that's the key here. Thorsen's papers are still being used as the reason why vaccines don't cause autism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so is he protected right now? Because I'm sure that the reason why he was out there and not brought back earlier is because the powers that be here don't want him to ever testify.
Right. I mean, you know, I wonder if he actually stole the stuff, or if maybe they said, we won't look, go ahead and take what you want and then get out of here. It's just too weird that this supposedly happened. And then, I mean, imagine if you or I stole all that stuff and then went off to Denmark and had the audacity to accept a job. Like, who's going to even give us a job, knowing that we are wanted by the USA? I mean, there's so much going on behind the scenes here that doesn't meet the eye. It just doesn't make sense. You and I would have been brought back in a New York minute, tried, and served the 260 years.
Yeah, okay, so this is one to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's go on to our next subject, unless there's anything else you want to say about Poul Thorsen, but let's talk about vitamin K, because this is quite a statement here. Babies are bleeding to death as parents reject a vitamin K shot given at birth. It's an essential shot, vitamin K shots, which help the blood to clot. They're one of 3 key interventions for newborns, along with antibiotic ointment and the hepatitis B vaccine. And it goes on like that. And just before you start talking about that, how many people that came on the bus told us that the nurses or doctors said to them in the hospital, if you don't give the vitamin K, your baby will bleed out by the time you get to the car. And it was not just one statement. This was obviously, they had some printout that they had to say this. And so they did. They were petrified. And if they said no, then CPS was called on their children. So this statement, I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to say it's absolute BS at its finest. But anyway, over to the true doctor.
Right. And what I find, because look, like always, I don't have a horse in this race. I don't have a child. I don't have one that was vaccine injured or vitamin K injured. I'm able to be pretty objective about the issues, I think. And what I see is some truth on both sides, and I see some misinformation on both sides. So I'm hoping today that I can give people a full spectrum picture of what vitamin K is, of what the issue is at birth, and what the real data shows, and what your options are, and that you should exercise your rights after you are fully informed. And hopefully this video can serve as information so that if you do give consent, it will actually be an informed consent, because you will not get this information from the hospital. You'll get what Polly just said or something along those lines. So should we go ahead and just talk about vitamin K a little bit? Okay. All right. So first off, let's ask ourselves, what even is vitamin K? Because we hear this, but we know it has something to do with bleeding. But it's basically a fat-soluble vitamin. So we have water-soluble vitamins and we have fat-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins don't degrade as easily, and they are taken up in the gut differently. They have to be surrounded by some sort of element, like bile salts, in order to have them brought in the form of something called micelles in through the intestines, so they can enter the circulation. Vitamin K is essential for blood clotting. There's a certain coenzyme. So the blood clotting cascade has factors that go up from 1 to 12, I believe. And so vitamin K is a coenzyme for 2, 7, 9, and 10. Those factors. So any of you nurses, doctors, medical people can know that. There was formerly a synthetic version of it, but it was discontinued due to side effects. And so now we have more natural forms that are plant-based. Even the one that's injected is plant-based. And just so you know, like we hear a lot lately about K1 and K2, like a lot of people are taking K2 for, along with their vitamin D to direct the calcium into the bones where it belongs. But both K1 and K2 all can assist with clotting. So Sources of vitamin K are mostly dietary in the form of dark leafy greens, things like Brussels sprouts, broccoli greens, fermented natto, which is so vile nobody would actually, well, I mean, maybe somebody eats it, but it's not the most delicious thing. Egg yolks have a bit of it, and liver. And so you can look up what kind of foods have vitamin K in them. And also know that some bacteria down in the colon also produce small amounts of vitamin K. And you'll hear it discussed as, oh, that's just an insignificant amount. But it's really not insignificant, because it's considered to be a risk factor if you've been blasted with antibiotics for a long time, that your vitamin K absorption and production will be decreased a little bit because of the loss of those bacteria. So that's just kind of a little background on what vitamin K is. So let's talk about it historically, because a lot of people think this is something new, and it's anything but something new. Vitamin K was discovered, at least in, I should say, modern times. Who knows, the ancients might have known about it. I suspect they did. But it was discovered technically in our culture in the 1930s. And in 1894, hemorrhagic disease of the newborn was first described. Okay, so in 1944, there was a Swedish study that talked about giving 0.5 milligrams of oral or injected vitamin K on day 1 of birth, and that it reduced fatal bleeding in the first week of life by 5-fold. Okay, and then in 1961, the AAP recommended an intramuscular shot in a dose between 0.5 to 1.0 milligrams. So those of us that were born in USA after 1961 could have had one of these injections. And in the UK, I believe it was not until the 1970s that it was given, and we'll get to that towards the end. All right, so vitamin K deficiency bleeding. Let's just talk a little bit about that, because there's an early onset, which can basically be the first week of life. It occurs in about 0.25% to 1.7% of newborns. That's roughly 1 in 60 to 1 in 250. And this is more common in certain high-risk cases, like when the mothers took medications affecting vitamin K. It includes usually bruising, umbilical bleeding. It can be more serious, but most of the time, the vast majority of time, it's not even considered a threat to life, okay? Like, even when it does happen. And then there is a late vitamin K deficiency bleeding, and this can occur between 2 and 12 weeks. And this is really the one to be considered, because we're often told that it happens in exclusively breastfed infants, as if breast milk is, just like this innately deficient substance that puts your baby at risk. And so if you say you're going to breastfeed 100% and prolong breastfeed, that's when they'll be chasing you around with a syringe. So this is more rare. What we know is about 4 to 7 cases per 100,000, which is 0.004 to 0.007% without prophylaxis, though it can be higher in some settings, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it is a bit more dangerous when this happens. 30 to 60% of cases involving brain bleeding and intracranial hemorrhage when we have this late onset. So what the response has been to the history and the research and the development of the injection vitamin K in birth centers and hospitals is that they are recommending an intramuscular injection within 6 hours of birth. Now, I just told you that the bleeding that can happen straight after birth is minuscule and of no consequence. So I just think to myself, like, why, what's the big rush, people? Like, why can't we wait until the day of discharge? Like I said about flu shots, like, why can't we think this over a little bit? Because the real problems happen between 2 and 12 weeks of life. But no, they've got to just rush right in, putting a needle in somebody who they say has a coagulation problem and telling you that your breast milk or your oral vitamin K drops won't do the job. So the intramuscular injection that we use today, it's plant-based. It has colloidal emulsions, because remember, it won't be used properly in the body and unless it's basically surrounded by fatty acids. And so you can have anything from castor oil to a polysorbate 80 in there. There's also solubilizers. There's dextrose, acetic acid, to stabilize pH, benzyl alcohol, 9 milligrams. And this is used as a preservative. And this has been a problem in the past. There have been cardiorespiratory instability as a result of using higher doses of this. So who's to say that lower doses are completely without risk at all? Some of these are preservative free, but I don't think you're going to be negotiating that during your contraction and the time of 6 hours that you're told the deadline is before this shot has to be given. There's a jaundice history also from the benzyl alcohol, if you look through the medical literature. So here's another thing that I feel has been a misconception on the side of the people who are against vaccines, and all of us, is that there's this idea that there's this huge amount of aluminum in this injection, and there's not a huge amount of aluminum. There's far less aluminum in here than would be in a vaccine, but there's no. It's not zero. There's definitely some. So supposedly, there's no more than 100 to 110 micrograms per liter, which translates to about 0.05 microgram per dose. So that's a really, really low amount. But we also know that we're often told that there are limits that have to be met with vaccines, including fetal cells and residual DNA, et cetera, that are supposed to be below 10 nanograms, and then we often find 2,000. So you have to consider that. But again, and there's also a black box warning, and we hear the anti-vax people talking about the black box warning. Well, the black box warning is if it's given intravenously. Okay, so it's not given intravenously though; it's given intramuscularly. All right, so these are some of the reasons. I'll give you some of the reasons that are given for the need of intramuscular vitamin K. They say that adult levels in the body are not reached until the baby is 6 months old. They say that there is poor placental transfer, but there's not zero placental transfer, okay? They say there are low amounts in human milk, but when I research it, there's not zero amounts in human milk, and that amount can be slightly increased by the mother having a diet rich in vitamin K or consuming vitamin K herself. Not saying that's a good idea, but I am saying it's a modifiable factor. So if you're a mother that's had, been on anticonvulsants or been on antibiotics and things that can lower your vitamin K levels, then those are things you might want to consider. And by the way, I did publish, I don't know, probably like 5 to 6 pages on vitamin K and Rising from the Dead. And I cover a lot of this here. So they also say that because a lot of people want to give the vitamin K drops to their babies instead of the injection. And the dogma is that giving the vitamin K drops is not reliable because absorption is variable, because of everything I mentioned previously of what's required and, the bile salts, et cetera, and because you'd only be giving it once per day, and because compliance might not be great and parents won't carry on giving it, up till 12 weeks of life. The other thing they say is that formula is fortified with it. And so that's what makes formula better for this particular issue, because every feed, the baby will be getting some vitamin K. So out of one side of their mouth, they're saying that the baby can't absorb it. And out of the other side of their mouth, they're saying it's better to have it in formula than drops because it's more consistent. So you can do the math on that yourself. So they say that the intramuscular injection is best because it's slowly released over time, and after the baby is born, the vitamin K levels will drop in an exclusively breastfed baby. And during that time, the intramuscular injection can be released to compensate for this supposed problem. All right, so what are the risk factors for low vitamin K in a newborn? Well, prolonged antibiotics to the mother or the baby, probably a one-off antibiotic, but who knows? I mean, antibiotics are antibiotics. If they kill off the bacteria, and there's a whole long list of bacteria that produce the small amounts of vitamin K, then yeah, it could lower the mother's vitamin K level and the baby's vitamin K level, because the babies are not born sterile like we've always thought. They do have a microbiome. It's low in the gut, but then it does start to increase once it's feeding. Some antibiotics like cephalosporins will also inhibit. Vitamin K can get recycled in the intestine, and so some antibiotics like cephalosporins will inhibit that. And then there's jaundice. So I want to distinguish the jaundice, the physiologic jaundice of a newborn is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something called cholestatic jaundice, basically where there's a blockage or impairment in the liver somehow. And that can also impair the absorption of vitamin K because those bile salts won't be available. Anticonvulsants to the mother, or anything that basically impairs this, changes the cytochrome P450, will increase the vitamin K breakdown. And then underlying conditions in the baby, if the baby has bowel issues, if the baby has cystic fibrosis, where there can be thick mucus, there can be decreased absorption on that basis. If there's massive diarrhea, things can be flushed out. And so vitamin K absorption presumably won't be ideal. And then any other gut bacteria alterations, again, probably a minor contributor to the deficiency. And the other thing is, even though birth trauma doesn't cause vitamin K deficiency, if there is a vitamin K deficiency, then birth trauma is a factor in potential bleeding. So, forceps delivery or ventouse, suction and things like that could put the baby more at risk. But if you're at home, or you're in a birth center, or even a hospital, and you have an easy birth, then that's not going to be an immediate factor for bruising and bleeding to the baby. So it is another factor that should be thought about. So now I want to talk about the actual numbers, the how often does vitamin K lead to actual real world problems, because the article that Polly just put up said, and what we were told on the bus is that people are told, what was that, Polly?
You mean people were told that the baby would bleed out by the time they got to the car?
Yeah, people would be told by the time they got to the car.
Be dead by the time you got to the car if you don't take the vitamin K right now.
Right. And also there have been a few cases where, babies were born naturally or born at home and exclusively breastfed, and then the babies are brought back weeks later with an intracranial hemorrhage. It does happen, okay? I'm not going to tell you it doesn't happen. It can happen. But what can we do to mitigate it? We'll get into that in a minute. But I want to talk about the real world numbers, and here they are. So I did I unashamedly use AI for things like this because it's just so easy to get the numbers, and the sources are always listed, so you can go and check. But I asked the question of what % of newborn babies would have a surgical need for brain bleeding due to vitamin K deficiency if, just say, theoretically, no vitamin K existed. And of course, the first answer is, well, there's no such thing as no vitamin K existing because because there's natural sources and vitamin K does exist. But of course, the AI understood my question, which was that if we didn't administer vitamin K. And so it would be on the order of roughly 0.001% to 0.005%, or about 1 in 20,000 to 1 in 100,000 births, based on extrapolating from untreated populations. And the populations that they extrapolated from were European populations from before the injection was given. All right. And so if we look at, this is a breakdown of the estimate down at the bottom, the late vitamin K deficiency bleeding without prophylaxis is thought to be that number there, 4.4 to 7.2 per 100,000 births, which if you look at it in terms of percentages, I mean, come on, it's 0.0044%. And then if we look at it in terms of intracranial hemorrhage, so we can have bleeding, but then which part of that bleeding is intracranial hemorrhage? That's 30 to 60% of that number. So the final numbers would be 1.3 to 4.5 per 100,000 births. And of that number, 1 in 5 babies with late vitamin K deficiency bleeding and brain bleed can die. So death would actually be on the scale of 0.26 to 0.9 babies per 100,000 births, all right? So I'm going to summarize this in this slide here. If no vitamin K was ever given, based on the European data, pre-vitamin K, late vitamin K deficiency bleeding would be 1.3 to 4.5 per 100,000 births. Of those children, the ones that would have a brain bleed requiring surgery would be 0.4 to 2.7 per 100,000. And only 1 in those 5 babies would have a brain bleed and die. So death, if you want to consider it this way, Like if you had somebody telling you the truth in that moment that Polly's just talking about, they should say, your baby could be one of 0.26 to 0.9 per 100,000 that could die from a brain bleed. So put that into perspective and decide if you want to have this injection put into your baby. Look, maybe you do. Maybe you think you can live in a world where there is zero risk. Go for it. But please understand that there is no such thing as zero risk, not whether you do it or whether you don't do it. And so you're basically looking at the odds. And I trust people to be intelligent enough to look at the information, put it all together, decide, and consent, because I have to trust people, because you are the ones that are going to be left with the aftermath. All right, so let's talk about the safety next. Like, why are parents refusing life-saving vitamin K for babies? Do you think there might be a reason? Or do you think they're all just brainwashed people, crazy people that listen to us and we're giving them misinformation? So when you look up whether or not there have been long-term randomized trials, what you're told is that there are no dedicated large-scale randomized control trials for neurodevelopment, allergy, or other effects specifically tied to the shot. And that everything we know pretty much comes from post-marketing surveillance data and pharmacokinetic studies. So there's one small preterm focused study noted transient jaundice differences with higher doses, but no serious long-term complications. So these are the kind of things that parents will be told if they have any doubts. And that, oh yeah, Cochrane reviews focused on bleeding prevention, but noted there's no safety concerns in available data. Now, that doesn't mean full stop, there's no safety concerns. Carcinogenicity and chronic toxicity. No experimental animal carcinogenicity studies have been conducted or identified. FDA labels state studies of carcinogenicity, genotoxicity, or impairment of fertility have not been conducted. Okay, so we don't have safety studies that can assure us that there's going to be no long-term problems. We're just supposed to believe, like we are with aluminum, that aluminum is safe because it's been used for so long and because we have really nothing to replace it with and need it. That's the bottom line. And we're told this with lots of vaccines and vaccine components. All right. So I decided to go back and look to see what is available in the medical literature that says that there may be some caution that should be advised. And there's two really cardinal studies that people should know about. And the first one comes from the British Journal of Cancer in 1990, and it was quite discovered by accident, really, that vitamin K could possibly be problematic. And what this study was, a very large study, and it was looking at 16,193 infants that were birthed within 1 week in 1970 in Britain. And 33 of those children later developed cancer by 1980. And it was noted that there was a statistically significant association between the neonatal administration of drugs, which would have included vitamin K among other things, and increased risk of childhood cancer. And the odds ratio was 2.6. So if there was no risk, it would be 1.0. If there was a benefit, it would be less than 1. And here we have 2.6, showing roughly 2.6 times risk in the drugs that were looked at here. And for leukemia specifically, the risk 2.65. And so this study was basically exploratory. It wasn't a pre-planned test of vitamin K. And the author really treated the result like it was just a signal for more research rather than a definitive proof of any causation. And it didn't distinguish well between the routes, whether it was intramuscular, oral injection, or fully distinguished with all confounders. But it did prompt the next publication that came in 1992 by Golding, the same author, on the subject of vitamin K intramuscularly to newborns. And so here we have it. And I've given you a link where you can actually download the full PDF. And I do think that everybody should have a copy of this, and it should be read and considered in conjunction with everything else that you might be told. So what this study showed is that childhood cancers associated with the vitamin K shot are a reality, and it wasn't just a low signal. The study used a case control design with 195 cancer cases from children born between 1965 and 1987. And then they matched them with 558 controls from a Bristol maternity hospital from their records. And the intramuscular vitamin K showed an adjusted odds ratio of 1.97 for childhood cancer. That's significant, because I just told you before, if there was no risk, it would be 1.0. While the oral administration did not, but the oral administration was a 1.15. So it's not like it was exactly the same. There's definitely was some difference with the oral administration, albeit much lower than with intramuscular. So the authors noted the finding was unexpected, but they called for oral vitamin K as a preferable alternative at that time. And they discussed the biological plausibility that was based on earlier lab work suggesting vitamin K might influence mutagenesis or chromosome changes. And they cite a couple of other reports that came previously from other countries as well in that paper. So I believe I provided that paper to Lou, and he's going to put it in the comment section area so you can download, you can actually see that paper. And so I'm going to wrap up now, basically just talking about philosophically why infants might have a low vitamin K level. And I think that Golding put it quite nicely in their conclusion. And I'm just going to read this conclusion to you, where it says, "It has always seemed physiologically perverse that evolution should have permitted the development of what is termed vitamin K deficiency in normal term infants who are breastfed, resulting in a small but definable risk of hemorrhagic disease of the newborn. The most likely explanation for this situation is that there is some evolutionary advantage that outweighs this risk. The finding of an increased incidence of childhood cancer in children given intramuscular vitamin K in the neonatal period suggests that a relative deficiency in vitamin K during this critical phase of rapid growth and development may protect vulnerable tissues from mutagenesis or cancer." And I suspect it protects tissues from other things like the, the ability of stem cells to get in and clean up, the damage that is part of every normal vaginal spontaneous delivery that happens. The protection afforded by oral vitamin K against hemorrhagic disease does not appear to carry the same risk of inducing malignancy, so it may be prudent to use oral rather than intramuscular vitamin K. So that's Golding's conclusion. And then there's, next slide, I have the evolution theory, those of us that believe in a divine creator believe that maybe it is by design, or that actually it is by design, and that there's a reason for it. And it's not actually a mistake that humans need to put their hand in and alter every single newborn because of that risk that I showed you earlier. And so what the evolution theory says is that, that having the thin blood and the low vitamin K might prevent clotting in the placenta and clotting in the pregnancy or birth. And we do know that, there are syndromes that pregnant women develop clots, and it can be catastrophic because the placenta is basically a bed of very small blood vessels that's providing nutrients for that child in utero. Mothers' diets in the past, they say, were diverse and included green plants where vitamin K was abundant. Well, I don't know why that would be in the past, because I think plenty of women that are eating a lot of vitamin K plants during pregnancy, and they should be. And again, a lot of people worry about oxalates when it comes to vitamin K, but that's really in terms of spinach. All these other things that I've mentioned are very low in oxalates. Broth will not give it to you. You actually have to eat the plant, and you have to cook the plant. And you will not kill the vitamin K if you do cook it. And then we're told that evolution optimizes for reproductive success on average, not zero mortality for every individual. Well, I don't think that's just evolution. I think that's just a reality of being on planet Earth, that there's no zero mortality for every individual, and vitamin K injections will not lead to zero mortality for every individual. It could reduce the risk of dangerous clots during the transition from fetal to newborn circulation. Okay, bingo, that's a really important issue, because if you don't know, the heart is basically bypassed the heart and lungs basically bypassed during gestation. And then once that baby is born, there's a complete change in the circulation where certain valves have to close off and certain valves have to open up as the blood is starting to flow through the cardiopulmonary system and that baby taking its first breath. Well, if you've got a clot in that system, it could be absolutely devastating for that baby. And then we're told clean births of modern days, exclusive breastfeeding for months, delayed solid foods, and reduced microbial exposure amplify the vulnerability that was minor in ancestral settings. Okay. We're told it may be a trade-off for rapid brain and organ growth. The fetus prioritizes neural development over building large vitamin K reserves or high clotting capacity in utero. Okay, blah, blah. Well, so when we get back to this Golding study, I think it's really important. Yet what's happened afterwards, if you go look it up, you'll be told that that study has been refuted, that there have been multiple randomized controlled studies that have looked at it in large populations and found there is zero risk of, of developing cancer later in life if you've had an intramuscular injection of vitamin K. But what I want to point out is that back in the day that Golding looked at this, and these children were born, do you know what the vaccine schedule was? Okay, in the 1960s, 1970s, there was no vaccine given at birth. The vaccines that were given to toddlers, and it was like, measles, maybe polio, diphtheria, not the enormous amount of jabs that babies are given today. So if you're going to look at all these recent studies and say that these show that there's no risk of cancer, well, in my opinion, just thinking it out logically, given that babies are bombarded not just with EMF, with injections at birth, with ultrasound after ultrasound during gestation, and everything else that goes on with modern births, C-sections, etc. I would say that any signal that Golding would have seen back then would be very much blurred out by all the other insults that are added to the equation in terms of birthing in today's world. So I still think that the Golding study is something we should pay attention to. I don't even think, look, I don't think you can repeat it unless you did a vaccinated, unvaccinated study or, and look, we can't even get that in terms of vaccines, let alone get one in terms of just babies that were given intramuscular injection. And they're out there. We met those people, didn't we, Polly? We met people that they'll say, oh, my baby's not been vaccinated, but they did get the vitamin K shot. Well, great. Let's take a look at these people whose babies only had a vitamin K shot versus babies who had no shots whatsoever at all versus babies who would have everything. This is a study that could absolutely be done retrospectively, which is a respectable way to analyze information and data and come to conclusions.
Okay, so
it freeze over first.
Right. Well, this is interesting you should say that, because when we were on the bus, we had a problem, and we've talked about this before. And the problem is that we were seeing unvaccinated kids with issues, and it turned out that we went back and asked, did you have the vitamin K? And that just cleared the whole thing up, because the ones who had no vitamin K, supersonic healthy, born in the woods, breastfed, all that kind of stuff. But the ones that had the vitamin K had issues of some kind. So I went to Paul Thomas, I went to Brian Hooker, and all the people that have done vax studies. Why is this not showing up in your studies? Because they don't have the data from the hospitals of who had vitamin K. They took it from their first pediatrician's office. So they haven't done the study that includes vitamin K, which is critical. So that's the first thing I want to say. So we know from the people of not just America, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, New Zealand, and Australia and Canada, the stories are all the same. The unvaccinated without the vitamin K, supersonic healthy with the vitamin K, issues of some kind. That's that. The second thing I know, and I'm going to say this as a Christian, God made us wonderfully, beautifully and wonderfully made. Okay, this is how we are. So when we give birth to this wonderfully, beautifully made human being that comes into this world, we're saying God has made a mistake. So humans are going to help God because he made such a big mistake, and we're going to jab this baby with hepatitis B and vitamin K. I have a massive problem with that. Obviously, I was not a Christian when I had my children, so I did not understand. But now that you know better, you do better. But I have a huge problem with that. He must have designed the body that if it's low in vitamin K, maybe it's the breast milk. I don't know what it is, but it will all be okay. And we see that it's okay, Dr. Suzanne Humphries, because we see gazillions of babies perfectly healthy that did not have the vitamin K. I understand your von Tooth argument. I understand all the interventions that could cause these kind of things. But if you have a birth that's good, your baby's fine, you're breastfeeding your baby, I don't know of any story of a baby dying. I mean, we've been on the road since 2016. I've been doing stories for 28 years, and I have never heard of an issue with a baby brain bleeding out, not once. And if it's someone out there who's got that story, please contact us. We want to hear it. So that could say something.
Right. Yes, definitely. And they don't bleed out; they bleed in. And so that's another kind of lie. They want you to think it's like Charlie Kirk. You're going to blood gushing everywhere. No, it happens in the brain. And let's get back to the numbers: 0.26 to 0.9 babies per 100,000 births, which is why you never heard of it, because it's that rare. Not only and because it's that rare, there are modifiable factors when it comes to this. And I think that's something that we can let mothers know, that they should be having a diet high in vitamin K rich foods, not because they're going to actually meet the levels that intramuscular injection can do, but that they'll give the levels that probably the baby was designed to have, which are low levels. And if the mother continues to eat that rich diet over time, then she'll have some in her breast milk. And if she hasn't had antibiotics, the group B strep, women are given antibiotics straight away for that all the time. And sometimes they're not even given a choice. It's just like, okay, thank you. And they take it. So, these are other risk factors that need to be considered. And so I'm not saying this so that people can be scared. I'm saying it so that you can know that there are things that you can do, that even that tiny, tiny, teeny little low risk could be lowered even further.
Well, to those parents listening and they're on the fence, they don't know what to do, just think about all those stories, thousands of stories that we've done, and the kids that have not had the vitamin K and unvaccinated are much healthier than the ones that have had just vitamin K and no vaccines. And that's coming straight from the people around the world. So I think that answers the question. Thank you, though, for your presentation, because people need that. But would you give your newborn baby the vitamin K jab or drops?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't, but I still think that everybody should understand the facts and act accordingly. I wouldn't get, like, I have a friend who just gave birth to a 7 pound something ounce baby, and it is just the most precious, beautiful, fragile looking little human being. And I like the thought of putting a needle of any sort into this baby is revolting to me. Thank God the baby was born at home. He's doing really well. And I think that if this baby was born in a hospital, it would still be in a NICU, and it could have ended up dead. And the fact that it was born at home naturally with a mother that understands everything, the baby's completely fine.
I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Honestly, I don't even need to ask someone if their child's vaccinated anymore. I can see it in their face. I mean, you can see an unvaccinated child and you can see a vaccinated child. It's just the way it is. And even in the parents that, I mean, we talk about, you and I have had this conversation before, like if your child is unvaccinated, supersonic healthy, and you're going to feed it McDonald's every day, then you're going to have some issues, or whatever the food is. But I don't know anybody even anymore that is understanding the whole process of unvaccinated and takes their kids to McDonald's. I don't even know that. I'm sorry, but I see the people that go to McDonald's tend to be the ones that vaccinate their kids. Harsh, I know, but it's what I've seen.
Right. Well, I wish that was always true, but then we saw the measles death, child. Remember that? Where that child.
I agree with that, but that was the hospital as well, pumping in or making them foods as well. Hospitals, a whole nother.
Serving McDonald's food in the hospital, right?
So when you're in a vulnerable situation and maybe you don't know anybody, there are those cases. I agree, but on the whole, the unvaccinated, healthy eating children that get sunlight, walk barefoot, all the things you've talked about a million times, they are so healthy. And of course, like Suzanne says, stuff happens. Bad things happen in life, and we don't know why. But on the whole, why make it worse by sticking in a toxic poison into that, like you say, that beautiful 7 pound baby? And again, I've looked at so many unvaccinated babies and their beautiful soft skin. How can you pierce it with a needle and inject evil into the body?
It is.
I like, because I'm just a mum, right? You can't take my medical license away because I don't have one.
Well, I can totally agree with you. And I also agree that, most people who choose not to vaccinate, they have a gut instinct that comes out of a place of knowing that nature knows best or God knows best, however you want to look at it. Because they're not all Christians that don't do this. Some people are just into nature. And they know that along with not putting chemicals into your baby means not putting chemicals into them on a regular basis through the food chain as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that Christians don't vaccinate. I know so many Christians that vaccinate, but it's amazing how we are brainwashed so much with the medical profession. When you go to a doctor, you do everything, buy an organic crib, buy a stroller that's the latest non-toxic. You do all these things, and then you just hand your baby over to the white coats and believe, even if you've got that gut feeling, you feel like something's wrong, you do it. And please, to the people out there, learn from us who have made so many mistakes. And you've got a doctor sitting in front of you right now that used to vaccinate, right?
I vaccinated adults. I didn't deal with children. You know what? I went through pediatrics. I did a 6-week rotation, and it was a really interesting time because I would see babies come in perfectly happy, and I would see them leaving screaming. And I just thought I could never live a life like that. And I didn't even understand the vaccine issue at that point, but I just thought there's no way that I want to be the cause, whether it's just because I looked in their ears or not, be the cause of them coming in happy and leaving screaming. And that was why I stayed away from pediatrics. But I did, not hands-on, but I placed the orders for probably hundreds, if not thousands, of hepatitis B vaccines to my dialysis patients, and probably flu shots to my dialysis patients before I knew better. And Polly and I are going to be covering hepatitis B in newborn in an upcoming talk, so that should be good as well.
Yes, we are. And to put right, the World Health Organization continually puts out absolutely outrageous lies and tweets and all those things that go on next. So we're putting them right. Dr. Suzanne Humphries, thank you for your time, your education, and all that you do for us.
Thank you, Polly. Thanks for what you guys are doing too.
All right, everyone, we're going to go to Isabella Yon with Mothers to Be.
Good morning, CHD TV. Welcome to our Mothers to Be segment where we chat all things preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And I'm so excited today to introduce a very good friend of mine, but also someone who's truly an expert in her field, Madalyn Alvarez. She's a licensed professional counselor and she specializes in both trauma and crisis. And she's going to be chatting to us today specifically about how this pertains to birth and postpartum. I know a lot of us mamas have felt all sorts of feelings throughout the pregnancy process and especially postpartum, especially as a new mum. So I'm super excited to have her on today to chat about that. So welcome, Maddie. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I've, watched your interviews and watched you from afar, and I'm just so honored to get to do this with you today.
Yeah, so fun. So why don't you kick us off with just introducing yourself and also what led you into this work as a therapist?
Yeah. So again, I'm Madalyn Alvarez. I'm a licensed professional counselor specializing in trauma and crisis. I have been in the field for about 3-4 years now. And yeah, what initially got me into it was my own mental health. And at a point in my life, feeling very disconnected from my body and who I was. And, through this work, I kind of found my way back home to myself, is what I like to say. And so it is something I can't even put in words for, how much I love doing. I love being able to walk through people's darkest times with them, because it can be really lonely. So that's pretty much what got me into it. I've always wanted to do it. It just became more important when I started struggling myself.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I think oftentimes it's our own personal stories and experiences that lead us to want to help others. So I love that that's your drive as well. So let's chat about what it looks like. What kind of symptoms or signs can we be looking for postpartum, especially, I think is a big one, that kind of indicate that we might have something going on that's not healthy. So yeah, anxiety, stress. I mean, you talk us through it. What should we be looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm like really big on just like the human experience in general. And so I try not to pathologize things too much because many of the responses that happen after pregnancy, during pregnancy, postpartum, all the things are actually really normal responses to a very big, it can be at times dysregulating event happening in your life, having a child. However, there are some points that you want to look out for where these reactions happen and they're not properly cared for, and things can become a little bit more concerning, especially if symptoms are ignored or minimized, and they can go on for too long. And then things like intrusive or upsetting thoughts about the birth can happen. Intrusive, obsessive, compulsive thoughts after birth around baby's health, things happening to baby, anxiety or panic that feels like nonstop, right? Not just your everyday motherly anxiety. It's persistent, day-to-day anxiety, feeling on edge, hypervigilant, even like avoiding appointments or things that remind mom of the birth. Let's think some more somatic symptoms: physical tension, shakiness, racing heart, digestive issues. A big one that I always point out, because this plays a big role in postpartum depression, is emotional numbness, feeling disconnected from baby or from themselves. And then things like irritability, sleep disturbances, anything that's hard to control, or we want to look at it as the more it's impacting your day, the more of a problem it is. And we want to kind of jump on that and get that addressed before it gets worse.
Yeah, that's such a good point. You raise a really good point that it is actually normal to feel somewhat not 100% yourself.
Right.
Birth, after you've gone through birth, and also postpartum. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Why do you think? Because I think in our culture, there's a big kind of hush, hush, women are meant to feel great and off they go back to their normal life, or, you've got to have this positive, experience. Why do you think so many women are minimizing their experience or feeling really guilty for actually putting a label on it or actually seeking help?
Yeah, I love that you brought up like the cultural aspect. I think that's a big thing, that in motherhood, we're taught that it should feel natural and joyful, and we should just like adapt to it immediately because that's what we were, made to do. And yes, there are like natural parts of it that just come naturally. There is the joy, and then there's not. And I think we're so big on just saying like, yes, born to be a mom, like you should just love it and be good at it. And there's a lot of women who don't initially feel that way. I, myself included, I struggled greatly with postpartum depression, and I was ashamed of it. I didn't like being a mom at first. I really struggled. It doesn't mean I didn't love my child, but the people around me were really making me feel, just like society, like I should immediately be good at this. And I wasn't. And I think a lot of women struggle with that. And so we minimize it because we're ashamed that, we're not loving it right away. And that is so normal. And I don't think we normalize it enough. And so I'm big on, that's kind of why I said the human experience. This is part of the human experience, that having a child and, going through like a shift in your identity is going to create maybe some not so great parts of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the biggest reason we kind of minimize.
Yeah, totally. And I think just having you on here and talking about it, I feel like a lot of people, because they're feeling ashamed, they do minimize and then they don't share. And so other people think, gosh, I'm the only one who's feeling this way, or this is not normal, when actually, like you said, it's probably a lot more common than we think.
I actually think some, giving birth can be traumatic in and of itself. I think where we can really go wrong is the aftercare. If it's not taken seriously, if it's not given attention, that's where we start to see things become problematic.
Yeah.
When it's not cared for properly, and then the problems go unnoticed and they get worse.
Yeah, so true. Okay, so what are some things that we can do to help? Obviously, seeing a professional is amazing.
Mhm.
Can you talk us through some of the different types of therapies? Because I know personally, looking at speaking to a counselor and then seeing that they offer different things like EMDR. What even is that? And what are some different therapies that mamas could look into and how they might be able to help them?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if we're looking at, specifically trauma, EMDR, there's something called brain spotting. These are basically what these are is modalities used for deeper processing. So to go beyond just talk therapy, right? Which talk therapy is wonderful. However, sometimes trauma gets a little bit deeper ingrained in us, and we need a little bit more help kind of working through that. So EMDR and brain spotting are great modalities. They both involve like using movement of the eyes and like bilateral simulation, which is just kind of you're stimulating both parts of your brain. Those are great forms of therapy. However, if you're not going through trauma and it's just, and I don't want to say it's just, but you're dealing with postpartum depression or postpartum OCD and anxiety, I like modalities that are focused on regulating the nervous system, because giving birth is going to dysregulate your nervous system, right? There's so many things happening. It's so overwhelming. It's like a shock. And so a lot of women can get kind of stuck in that fight or flight response, right? Where we're either really irritable and defensive, or we're frozen and we don't know, how to get unstuck and out of that state. Somatic therapy is great for that, which is basically really focusing on internal awareness of what's going on in our body, right? Like you'll often hear people say, if you've ever been in therapy, like, where do you feel that in your body, right? Like, there's a reason we ask that. For example, I feel anxiety in my chest. When I get that feeling, I know, oh, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. Like, I need to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
What happens sometimes in postpartum depression or any sort of depression you experience after birth, we disconnect from our body and we don't feel it anymore. We're so focused on baby and all of these other things that we stop listening to what's going on inside of us. So I would say, yeah, like somatic therapy, nervous system regulation tools, those are the kinds of things you're going to want to focus on.
Amazing. And so, for example, if someone was to want to do these things, can they reach out to like a licensed counselor and they would be able to walk through these things with them for the most part?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm giving you a very brief overview. I recognize this probably sounds like a different language to some people,
No,
but
it's fascinating.
yeah, reach out to a licensed professional counselor. I'm also at the end of this, I've included a few resources that people can utilize to kind of get started with that.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. And what about is there anything that people can do at home? Anything to kind of get people started or just to feel better, in the moment until they can go and see a professional?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people hear the words or hear the phrase take a deep breath, and it's not as simple as that, but as a somatic therapist myself, breath is so powerful. Um, Definitely some breathing techniques. There's several really great breathing techniques you can utilize. Any type of touch grounding, I'm big on. Maybe babies over there crying and screaming, and you haven't slept in 5 days, and you're exhausted, and you just need a minute to ground yourself, because we can get very easily taken away in our emotional state. And so some grounding I like to do, there's the chest tap. That's a great one. There's the butterfly tap. Sometimes it's as simple as like hand on the heart. I'm going to take a few deep breaths and repeating whatever feels good to your body, whatever it needs to hear, whether it's, I'm safe. This is okay. I'm going to be okay. I always say back to basics. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. There's also some like vagus nerve stimulation you can do, which might sound a little weird, but like rocking back and forth, a good humming, that
Yeah.
frequency kind of brings some nervous system regulation, or slow stretching. So again, very simple, not like groundbreaking things, but things that if you do this intentionally, you can bring calm and safety back into your nervous system.
Yeah, it's so true how powerful even the small things are. I remember like reading and hearing about breath work a very long time ago and just thinking, oh, well, like, I don't really see how that could help that much. But then
Right.
being stuck in fight or flight and my adrenals were tanked, that's a story for another day. But adding such a simple, easy, free routine into your life can actually make such a big impact. And breath work is huge. Just like you said, especially as a mum, I now have young toddlers running around, and I know you too, Maddie. But even you're right, baby or not, kids are not, just taking a second away from the chaos just
Right.
to breathe and kind of step back into the moment and reset. It almost feels like a reset from the chaos.
Absolutely.
Is so powerful. So I totally love all those tips. Thank you for sharing.
And real quick, do also want to add in there, you don't have to do it all alone. So those are just some simple things to say you can do on your own. But for those mamas out there, much like myself, that are maybe hyper independent and struggle to rely or ask for help, I want to encourage, please ask for help if you need it. And you do not have to just regulate on your own. You can co-regulate, you can reach out to loved ones. Because I know there are a lot of women that will probably jump straight to, let me do this by myself, right?
Yeah, so true. That's me too, actually.
Yeah.
I'm horrible. I'm horrible. I want to chat about partners, friends, family, just people in our lives. How can we support a mum who might be struggling with trauma from birth or having a tough time postpartum? Do you have any advice for partners and people in, people's lives on how we can best support these mamas?
Absolutely. I think my biggest piece of advice that I wish I could like scream from the rooftops is just listen without trying to fix. Just hear. I think there's this like really beautiful like sense of community when somebody has a baby or is bringing new life into the world. And I think sometimes in that we want to give advice. We want to say like, here's what I did and you should do this and this. And it's like, that's so appreciated and that's lovely. But at the same time, just no, let's not do that. It's asked. I think that's beautiful. That's wonderful. But sometimes just hearing and listening and letting mom have her own experience and know that people are there, I think can be the most powerful thing that you can do for somebody struggling postpartum or just like moms in general.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I think I'm a chronic, like, let me try and fix that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. It's so tempting to be like, this worked for me, but you're right. Everyone's experience is so unique and different. And what works for one doesn't work for anyone. So everyone.
And that's not to say you can't like share, of course, like, especially if someone's, asking for advice, please like share. I just think that it's a very vulnerable time for moms. And so we just want to be really careful to not try to fix, but to be there and just like validate her feelings, offer practical help. Right. I can't fix all your problems and regulate your nervous system for you, but I can, run errands for you or hold your baby for a little bit if you're okay with that. Or just like gently check in. It can feel like a really lonely time. And so just checking in and saying like, hey, like still thinking about you. I'm here for you. Can be so powerful for a mom.
Yeah, so good. What about the mama who knows something might not be right, but she's afraid to ask for help? Or I think another common one is maybe thinks that she doesn't have big enough of a problem to seek help, but knows something might not be quite right. Do you have any advice for those mamas or next steps for these mums?
Right. Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice would be to listen to your body. If you feel like something's not right, I would rather you reach out for help, and maybe there's not something horribly wrong than you minimize what you're experiencing and it get worse.
Yeah.
I know it can be difficult to reach out for help. I even know accessibility can be difficult, and finding help can be hard, because if I'm being quite honest, other countries do it a lot better. For postpartum, resources are better, time off is better. It's hard here. So if you feel like something's off, listen to that to the best of your ability. And if you don't know how to get help, ask for help. Ask a mom, ask your friends, ask whoever. Again, I'm also going to include, I've got probably 6 or 7 different resources in here, from Postpartum Support International, National Maternal Mental Health Hotline. I love PMH Connect, because this is encompassing preconception, during pregnancy, postpartum. Then there's also Trauma Informed Maternal Health Directory, which is specifically, trauma related stuff. And then at the very last one I included was just a pregnancy and postpartum mental health toolkit. It's a PDF. You can just kind of briefly go over it. And yeah, these are just things to kind of help you get started. You can also reach out to me. I've included my information as well. I am a trauma-informed therapist and have experienced the whole postpartum journey myself. And let me tell you, it was not always a good one. I did struggle pretty deeply. And so if you need help, honored to also help you in that journey.
Yeah, Maddie, let's touch on that. So I see your emails included below. How can people, do you have a social media or a website? How can people also connect with you and learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a private practice called Passage to Peace Therapy. I do have working on a website right now, but I do have an Instagram. It's Passage to Peace Therapy, just one word. You can find me there. Or you can email me, passagetopeacetherapy@yahoo.com. And yeah, even if you just have questions and you're not quite sure where to go, please feel free to reach out. I'm, big on helping guide people to the place they need to get to.
Amazing. Maddie, thank you so much. Now, we always end our segment with one question, and that is, if you have one piece of advice for a new or expecting mama, what would it be?
You're not failing. You're
Nice.
not failing. Whatever it is, you're not failing. You're doing the best you can. And your nervous system is trying to communicate, not criticize.
So good. So good. Maddie, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you guys found this as informative and helpful as I did. I know I'm going to be taking a lot of things away for this next postpartum that I'm about to experience. So Maddie, thank you so much for being here. And thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next week. And stay tuned for our People's Study Story of the Day.
So, can you tell us your name?
Yeah, Julia Einhorn.
And you are?
Justin Einhorn.
And you are married?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many children do you both have?
We have 2 boys.
How old are they?
5 and 7.
Okay, and so let's go back, talk about when you were pregnant. Did you guys have a conversation about vaccines?
So it came up. We
Week 30.
Yeah, week 30. We took a really amazing birthing class.
Birthing class.
A hypnobirthing class,
Oh,
and the teacher, someone I think asked a question about vaccines, and she said, "You know what? I'm not going to go into vaccines, but she directed everybody.
Was that the last class?
I think it was the last class. Yeah, she directed people to read Dr. Suzanne Humphries. She said, "Look her up."
There was a few things, but Humphries was that, and I was like, "Oh, is Humphries going to be here?" I was like,
so
like that's like celebrities to us.
She's going to be at the conference tomorrow.
I know. We were just talking about it.
It's not far. It's like 4-hour drive.
No, I know. So we bought the book.
Yeah, I read the book, and we spent probably like 30 when she was allowed on YouTube. At this time, it was all on YouTube.
Yeah,
when it was all, you can get it.
So he was watching videos, and we were like, okay, we're not going to do vaccines. At least, from the beginning, we're like, okay, well, at that point. And so we were planning on, and I actually had switched from an OB to a midwife. We were going, delivering at a birthing center when I was 30 weeks after taking this class. And so I'm like, okay, more natural, more holistic. And my son was 3 weeks early, and I had ordered the VitaminK drops, to give him instead of doing the VitaminK shot, and they hadn't come in the mail yet. And when after I delivered him, they definitely pressured us. The midwives pressured us.
What kinds of things did they say?
It was just like, you're doing it right, and I was like, well, I ordered the drops, so I didn't have them. And I just, delivered him, and it was kind of a traumatic, a little bit.
Yeah, and
delivery.
We're very new
parents.
Hard to stick to your guns.
New parents.
Was he little? Was he very light and small?
He was 6 pounds. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, he was. No, he wasn't. He wasn't like. Yeah, he wasn't considered a preemie. At the time, with his weight and everything, but
Didn't he make to be born there? He made it by a day. If he was a day earlier, we would have had to go to the hospital.
But he was born exactly 37 weeks, so we were able to use the birthing center instead of the hospital.
So were they getting quite cross with you that you? Not
cross. It was just kind of when I was in labor, at one point they couldn't find his heartbeat, so they were like, he needs to come out now, and it was like, you need to push, he's coming out now. And there afterwards she was like, well, there was a little trauma, he had to come out fast, and but not once did they ever say what the side effects could be or anything. That was never brought up at all. And
well, frankly, we didn't realize VitaminK until recently what's in that thing.
Yeah.
So what happened to him after he had it? I'm so sorry. Do you want to, Claire? Do you want to go? Sorry, there's someone at the door. Right. Sorry. Carry on.
Yeah. So when he was first born, he was started kind of nursing right away. He had the shot.
We went home, and then they do the tests, right?
But he got sleepy. The issue was he got sleepy, and he wasn't nursing as much as he should have been. And then they came, because we delivered at the birth center. The midwife came to the house, I think 2 days later, to check on things.
Check for the
bilirubin. Did the bilirubin test, and she was like, oh, it's a little bit higher, but not concerning. She's like, you know what, push your pediatrician appointment up a day instead of going 2 days later, push it up a day. So we pushed it up a day. We went to the pediatrician, but he wasn't nursing a lot. I was having a lot of issues. He was sleeping a lot. It was hard to wake him. And by I think the third day, then they retested his bilirubin, and it was really high, to the point where the pediatrician was like, you need to go to the hospital now. And immediately he needs to be in the NICU. And we were really? We were kind of I was calling lactation consultants, because I'm why does he have to, what's the rush? What's the, we didn't want the interventions if not needed. And they're like, no, he needs to be in there. And when we arrived, I remember when we arrived at the hospital, they're
like, where were you? Yeah.
They were so nasty to us. Really? They were like, where were you? This is your son. How come you... And they immediately took him from us. They put him under the lights, and he was under the lights for 36 hours. And I couldn't hold him, couldn't nurse him. I mean, I was pumping and able to bottle feed him the milk that I was pumping. But they were very cross with us, that we should have been there sooner.
What a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first First few days.
Yeah.
Yeah, being in the NICU there.
Being in the NICU was tough because I wasn't an admitted patient, so I didn't have a room. So I was just on like the pull-out bed that's like in the room, and I'm like, I had to use the bathroom, and you have to go through security out these locked doors to use. Like there was no bathrooms that like mothers could use in the NICU. Like it was crazy. You had to go out these locked doors, and I had to get buzzed in every time, and I was like 2 days postpartum. Like so it was it was very intense.
Awful.
Yeah.
So with your next child?
Yes, we did not do the VitaminK.
Well, we had the other.
Well, we had the antibiotics, but we did not do.
Forced upon us though.
Why?
So I was with our second son. I tested positive the Group B strep. Like whenever they do that 36 weeks, I think, around there. And if you're positive, then they recommend doing IV antibiotics during labor. And we were like, absolutely. So I was doing everything. I mean, I call my natural. I'm like eating garlic, and I'm doing all kinds of things to try to like, and they won't retest you, even though we were using a more holistic. We were using the midwives again at a birthing center, a freestanding birthing center. But their policy was also that you needed, you could decline. Well, that was the other thing they missed.
They didn't tell you. It's like, oh yeah, you can decline it, but they didn't say, but we send you to the hospital. Right.
So when I tested positive, I said to them, I can decline the antibiotics, right? Oh yeah, sure. You just have to sign a waiver, and that's fine. And so I said, okay, that's great. So but I'm still doing things to, like, because I didn't want to have it. And so I'm like, okay, I should have a water birth and all these things. And so when I went to labor, my water actually broke before contractions began. And so I called the midwives, and at first she was like, okay, well, I'll get ready, you should come in. And then she calls me back. She's like, I just looked at your chart, your Group B, tested positive. So you need to be on IV antibiotics starting now. And I said, but I don't want to. And she's like, well, if you decline, then you have to go across the street to the hospital. Then you will have risked out of the birthing center if you don't do the IV antibiotics. And we were just like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Like, it's like midnight. Like, I was like, I don't want to be at the hospital. I had, and I was like, at the same time, I don't want to do IV antibiotics. And literally as we're driving there, my contractions began. And we're like 5 minutes away. So we get there, and I'm having contractions at that point. And she was like, sorry, no, like, you can't, because my water already broke. I was required to. And so, and it was awful. Like, as soon as the IV went in, I had metal taste in my mouth. Awful. I was throwing up. I was nauseous the entire, and I was a 3-hour labor. I had him in 3 hours.
Next time, home birth.
Yes. Well, that's what actually our chiropractor, when I told her the story, she was like, you should have called me. I would have come over, and you could have just had him at home. Because
these people crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
So crazy. How are your children now?
They're great. I would say they're different. I would say my oldest, who knows, it's just his personality, but he definitely was at the VitaminK shot. I don't know, he has some emotional regulation issues. He has some more hyperactivity issues than our younger one. It's hard to hard to tell if it's related.
Yeah.
It's
so hard to know, but
it could be.
But
he had the VitaminK. My younger one did.
He doesn't forget anything though.
No. They're both. They rarely get sick.
So next time.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
But no, I mean that's the And has Leo had antibiotics other than that?
No.
I don't think he's ever.
No,
and then Luke, maybe for a year once. No.
Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 times.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But no, they don't. They rarely get sick. No, Luke doesn't really get sick. Right?
Yeah. And did you guys get COVID?
We had COVID. Yep.
So this is important.
Yeah.
How did you get over? Because you're alive, whereas these people aren't.
Yeah.
How did you get over your COVID? Did you take the COVID shot?
No.
Of course not.
No.
So how did you get over COVID? What did you do?
We were doing high dose vitamin C, zinc, NAC. Like, we were doing all the, lots of water and staying hydrated, and
Well, when we got COVID, their shot wasn't out.
Yeah, we got it.
We got it that first
December 2020.
The first December, so it is March. Yes, and then so we were lucky.
Yeah.
My 87-year-old dad got it too because he was in this house. We're a 2-family house. But he was fine. We had a hard time keeping him in. He's like, I need to go out and get coffee.
He's like, I'm not staying home. This is just a cold. And he was like,
yeah. And he didn't get the shot either.
No, he did later on.
He did later on.
That was another thing. 60 days, the shot was available. He was 60 days out. I'm like, Dad, you had COVID 60 days ago. You shouldn't be getting this thing. But unfortunately, my stepmother, I think, pressured him into it.
Yeah. Is he doing well?
He's fine.
He did collapse.
Did he get a booster? Oh wait, no. What happened at the race? Because he's a big runner.
He collapsed the next day after having a COVID shot.
I think was that the booster or the shot? I think that might have been the booster. He went and ran a 5K like the next day. They told
Wait,
him.
How old is he?
87.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
But he collapsed or something happened.
Yeah, he collapsed during the race or after the race or something.
And supposedly they never told him that you're not supposed to do any physical exercise or something for like 24 hours. There was some kind of thing that they never had mentioned.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. Well, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. And we got to sign that name on the bus as well.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to hearing about your next child.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for telling your story.
Yeah. Thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.